The United States federal government does not have tax revenue broken down by race. However, we can get a pretty good idea of what it is based on what data is publicly available. First, we know how much each tax bracket in the United States pays in taxes. Second, we know the racial distribution into each tax bracket, and so it's very simple math. Now, the next question is, how much government does each group use? And contrary to a lot of people's expectations, this part isn't really going to matter much. The overwhelming majority of government is not going to differ between the races. Blacks and Hispanics use more income security, Medicare and Medicaid more. Whites use Social Security more, if I recall correctly. And so there's some discrepancy in government use. Hispanics and blacks do use welfare more, but the big effects here are going to come from differential tax payments. And in 2014, the net budgetary effect was around negative $10,000 per black person, negative $7,300 per Hispanic, and positive $2,800 per white person. But that's assigning blacks and Hispanics their own cut of military spending. Let's, just as a thought experiment, assign 100% of military spending to whites. With this static military assumption, the whites are still net taxpayers of $1,260, blacks negative $7,700, Hispanics negative $5,160. So even assigning 100% of military spending to whites, this was about $603 billion a year in 2014 in terms of a budget deficit caused by blacks and Hispanics. So diversity is really expensive. One counter to that is that the presence of lower earning population props up the earnings of higher earning populations, right? The argument is that instead of being ditch diggers, the high IQ whites are freed for higher level work. Of course, the caveats that everyone's an individual, there's going to be highly intelligent blacks and Hispanics up there as well. But I mean, these are just the broad strokes of the argument here. But this sort of prop up argument doesn't seem to pan out in reality. Areas with a higher proportion of non-whites don't see any higher white wages than areas which are more white. In other words, the wages of whites in the South and West don't seem to be substantially propped up by having high black and Hispanic populations. Granted, white males in the West are a little higher, but it would be a long road to show that that's a function of the Hispanic presence and not the effect of either Silicon Valley or the oil industry in Texas, or whatever, for example. Moreover, a Dutch meta-analysis of 384 studies on the impact of immigration on native wages in the U.S. and European Union found that a 1% increase in immigration was associated with a 0.119% decrease in native wages. Now, this could all just be noise. The effect may actually be zero, but the takeaway is that there's no propping up effect, certainly. And the fiscal impact of these racial groups in an economy can be treated more or less independently of each other and can be added and subtracted in their effect. And so I think about the state of California passing a bill mandating universal health care. A $400 billion price tag and no way to pay it, says the LA Times of all places. Now, if they say it's a $400 billion price tag, you can be pretty sure it's going to be a lot more than that. And I'm looking at this and it's like, look at this guy. Look at this guy. This guy is a fucking expert on how well this is all going to play out. Okay, he knows everything. Look at that face. Look at that face. He'll have you know that the Soviet Union wasn't real communism, that Stalin, he had to break a few eggs, or he'll tell you about the difference between Trotsky and Lenin and all that stuff. Now, look, Norway can have universal health care. Denmark can have it. Even Sweden can have it, okay? Even Poland can have universal health care, because even though Poland is kind of poor compared to the United States, if Poland were a state, it would be the poorest state in the Union, and it would be substantially poorer than blacks if blacks were their own country, or blacks in the U.S. were their own country, okay? And it would be poorer than Mississippi, but Poland, it's full of whites, so it runs relatively balanced budgets, and things are a little bit cheaper in Poland, and by being able to do with less, here and there, Poland can have a universal healthcare system. But when you have the brown hordes who either don't understand or don't care about this stuff and are constantly being told that there's all these rich white people over here with a big pile of gold that they're just not sharing with them, well, the result is not going to be some sort of sensible plan, but it's going to be just a war over finances, with groups trying to get their hands into the till and other groups' hands out of the till. Okay, you're going to get voting wars. And when you have more and more blacks and Hispanics and fewer whites, some things are going to have to give. Environmental protections are going to be, they're going to become more and more costly. Politicians will look at this and say, look, we got all these brown people, and they're taking a bunch of Gibbs. They now form a majority of the voters, and so they're voting for more and more Gibbs every year, more Gibbs-me-nats every year, and we have to generate some real fucking cash right now. That means fracking. That means coal power. That means all these expensive little bikeways and nature trails are bye-bye. Okay, and you white liberals are going to find out real fast just how little your brown allies actually care about the environment when the rubber really hits the road. Diversity is expensive. It's almost like having another military budget.